Hi, welcome to episode 02A, part 1 of the orientation to Prism Clarity. Our focus today is clarity through communication structure. And I'm Caroline. And in this episode, I'll be speaking through the role of the therapist. Understand that I am not a therapist. The therapist is one of 4 voices of reasoning within the Prism philosophy system, and it is the role that helps the mind find balance, the one that notices distortion before it takes hold and tends to the spaces where emotion and thought meet. This series is dedicated to helping you strengthen your reasoning system, to train the mind to reason with clarity and purpose, to hold truth steady, move with integrity, and aim for good. And that will become so helpful when we start Series B on emotional diagnostics. So here we go. So our focus within the Prism Thinking About Thinking philosophy is to get clarity of thought by understanding the Prism communication structure and using that understanding to strengthen your internal reasoning system. Clear reasoning doesn't just shape better thoughts. It restores balance and calm. Because when the mind reasons well, the noise quiets and clarity settles in. But before the mind can reason soundly, it must recognize what interferes with clarity. In episode 01A, we introduced fault lines, those unseen cracks that form when the mind structure becomes vulnerable. Symptoms show as broken thinking, emotional fractures, and misaligned understandings. Those are some of the subtle signs that clarity has been stressed. When left unaddressed, those same vulnerabilities become distortions. Every system experiences distortion, whether those systems are electrical, digital, or human. It's what happens when the signal between what's sent and what's received breaks down. In reasoning, what interference can appear as are expectations that poses truth, emotion that bends meaning, or intent that misfires from the source or is misunderstood at the target. The appearance of distortion is often subtle. Overthinking, assumptions. There's a tension, that small zap or troubling, that pull that tells you something's off. Distortion clouds both reason and moral judgment because our character, our morality, is built on the quality of our reasoning. When reasoning strengthens, character strengthens. In ancient times, a group of individuals referred to as the Stoics taught that peace comes from reasoning rightly, that it isn't events or circumstances that disturb us, but our opinions about them. Prism thinking agrees, because when reasoning clears, calm returns, because truth and peace share many of the same patterns. One of the guiding principles of the Prism philosophy about thought is this: if you can recognize it, name it, and define it, you can claim it. And what you can claim, you can control. Our goal isn't to eliminate distortion. It's to recognize it fast enough that it can't reshape what's true or what's right. In part 1 of this E02A series, we'll explore how to spot distortion within ourselves through the voices of reasoning and from the outside world through what we listen to, watch, and absorb. Because when you can identify distortion for what it is and control it, you restore the alignment between truth, intent, and understanding. And that alignment is what we call clarity. The therapist's role and helpful tools under clarity through communication structure, communication patterns is the topic. And before we can talk about distortion, we have to understand how our reasoning even moves. Every thought you form travels a path from awareness through meaning toward expression. That movement happens whether you're speaking to someone else or reasoning within yourself. The Prism calls this the communication pattern, the way truth, thought, and intent move through our structure. When our structure is aligned, our mind, body, spirit, and soul, clarity flows naturally. When it isn't, that's when distortion creeps in. So before we begin identifying distortion, let's anchor first in the patterns that identify communications and how we see that structure and how reasoning through that structure connects every part of you to what you know, think, and believe. So the first pattern that we will use in communication patterns is the essence of man. Yes, you've seen it before. When we look at it through the lens of communication and reasoning, it reminds us that every act of reasoning moves through this structure within us. The mind remembers and projects, the body grounds and expresses, and the soul experiences and interprets. And the spirit inspires and aligns. Simple enough, but everything we reason, every decision we make must travel through this pattern within us. Do you agree? The role interaction pattern, which is the next of our communication patterns, takes our voices of reasoning and layers them out in a pattern that may be familiar to you. Now, when we focus on communication, this pattern shows how our inner voices will interact with the essence of who we are. Can you see it yet in the positioning of the elements? The spiritualist role placed at the northern peak, the synthesist grounded at the southern position, the therapist to the left and to the right of the survivalist, and the survivalist which is in the center position. We've talked about each role having a voice, and when this pattern is combined with the essence of man pattern, you'll begin to see how they influence internal communication. Let's take a look at those combined patterns so that you can begin to see that visual. So we have the essence of man and the overlay of the role interaction pattern. Now we can see how reasoning moves through the full system and how the voices of reasoning interact with our essence. The spiritualist connects through intent, lifting thought toward meaning. The synthesist weaves meaning from past to present to the hope of the future. The therapist governs thought, bringing reason and remembrance into focus, while the survivalist feels the weight of it, translating those thoughts into emotional truth. This is the internal reasoning loop, the living structure within you. Every message, decision, and truth moves through this system before it ever reaches the outside world. Reasoning is healthiest when these voices listen to one another, awareness guiding thought. The next layer, the to-me pattern, is where all of those elements, all of those movements meet self, the me and me. Let's take a look. Ha! I bet you were looking for something fancy. The to-me or soul survivor pattern is the pattern that represents the soul survival function, how meaning is processed in real time. The inward arrows show how experience arrives to me, the world pressing in. The outward arrows show the translation, how I project or assign meaning through me and back into the world. It's a living cycle of intake and output, where perception becomes interpretation and interpretation becomes influence. And this is the essence of man, role interaction, and the to-me patterns of communication combined. Not finished yet, though. When we put these patterns together, you can see the soul's centering function, how life feels as it happens to me, and how meaning forms through me. The goal isn't to stop the flow, it's to filter it through truth before it defines you. When the survivalist is healthy, experience is filtered through truth and remembrance. When it's strained, everything feels personal, as if the world is happening to me instead of through me. Recognizing this pattern helps you tell the difference between reacting to life and reasoning with it. But there's one more layer. the influence of the external world itself. And the final meta pattern of human influence for our communication patterns. Here's where the internal system meets the external world. The meta pattern of human influence. Every act of reasoning happens within the environment that talks back. The world presses in with heaviness, weariness, experience, objectives, and audience, each shaping how we receive and return meaning. The spiritual feels weariness. The therapist processes experience. The survivalist navigates the middle ground, and the synthesis translates it all for the world to hear. This is the complete communication circuit, the movement of truth, thought, and meaning between the internal self and the world around it. Distortion begins when the exchange loses balance, when outside noise replaces inner alignment. Our goal isn't to silence the world, it's to reason clearly within it. The therapist's role, concept review for clarity through communication structure, internal distortion, and voices of reasoning. So do you remember our talk on drift? It's another name for distortion. It can begin inside, long before the external world gets to see it. Each of our inner voices filters reality through its own lens. And when that lens bends, distortion appears. The therapist's voice is the caretaker of the mind. Its clear aim is emotional clarity, understanding what's felt, why it's felt, and giving it clean language. When distortion sets in, that clarity becomes distorted feeling. The therapist begins to over-explain or soothe instead of solve. Feelings get rationalized away or over-validated until nothing changes. The mind talks about the feeling instead of through it. The mind talks about the feeling instead of through it. Something interesting to think about. The moral danger here is avoidance, truth deferred under the guise of calm. In the survivalist voice, it guards structure and endurance, the practical reasoning that keeps us upright under pressure. Its distortion becomes false logic, conclusions that sound right in the moment but collapse when tested or run around in circles. It shows up as all or nothing thinking, catastrophic leaps, or the belief that, I had no choice. This is reasoning built for defense instead of endurance. The moral drift here is rigidity, mistaking control for strength. Now, the spiritualist voice aligns with the spirit. Its undistorted aim is truth and alignment, letting inspiration move through faith without bending to fear, fatigue, or inner conviction that condemns instead of corrects. Distortion here becomes misunderstood truth. When divine truth is filtered through exhaustion, ego, or self-judgment, it sounds like misplaced certainty, over-spiritualizing, or the harsh voice of condemnation that calls itself conviction. The danger is subtle. Scripture or belief used out of context, turned inward as blame instead of guidance. The spiritualist strength is discernment, to pause, test, and bring what's heard back through reason and grace before calling it truth. The synthesis voice, rooted in the body, seeks integration, to hold thought, feeling, and action in balance. Its distortion is also subtle, a blending error. It happens when you absorb too much from others, adopting their truths before testing them against your own. And the danger here is loss of identity, becoming so adaptive that you forget what's actually yours to carry. Each of these distortions signals a misalignment reasoning lens. The task isn't to silence the voices, it's to recognize which one has drifted and guided back to truth. Because the clearer your internal dialogue becomes, the steadier your external one will be. The therapist's role, concept review, under clarity through communication structure, external influence and noise. So distortion doesn't always start in the mind. Well, sometimes what starts it is what seeps in through what we allow around us. Every lyric, headline, post becomes part of the environment your reasoning works within. Some things just pass through, but others stick, shaping what you think, how you feel, and even what you believe until external, unclaimed thoughts and emotions start speaking louder than your truth. That's where clarity begins to slip. When feeling takes authority over reason, you stop choosing your thoughts and start reacting to them. The Prism teaches that what enters your mind becomes part of your reasoning system. You can't control every input, but you can control what you give weight to, what you allow to repeat, to echo, to grow. In the meta pattern of human influence, the world speaks through every channel, your habits, your media, your mood. The goal isn't to shut the world out. It's to stay intentional about what you let in. Sometimes that sad song really speaks to where you are, and that's okay. But don't stay there. Choose where you want your mind to go. Let the next song, the one you turn on deliberately, lift you toward who you want to be, what you want to feel. That's how you move with the integrity of your purpose. You anchor to truth, move with integrity, and aim for good. A mantra worth keeping, yes? Because clarity isn't just about what you think. It's also about what you choose to keep from getting in. The therapist's role, concept review, clarity through communication structure, Stoicism and the Prism OSP. So the Stoics believed peace could be found through disciplined reasoning, through mastering the inner life so that external events lose their power. Their philosophy rests on 4 pillars: wisdom, courage, justice, and temperance. Each virtue they taught was born of reasoning rightly, training the mind to choose what is rational over what is emotional. The prism begins there, but it doesn't end with discipline. It knows that ignoring the emotions is not the answer. It adds what the Stoics left implicit, that clarity must align with both truth and intent, drawn from the essence of a person, not just the discipline of the mind. Because reasoning alone can become self-serving. It can justify, defend, or detach, and still feel calm while drifting from what is good. In Stoicism, virtue is sustained through restraint. In the prism, it is sustained through alignment, the deliberate harmonizing of truth, intent, and reasoning. Where the Stoic disciplines the mind to endure, the prism thinker disciplines the self, the me in me, to discern. Both seek peace, the quiet of the noise through inner balance. But Stoicism finds it through control, and the prism through coherence, the integration of truth, reason, and purpose. The therapist's role, helpful tools, clarity through communication structure, spaghetti wall, the gatekeeper. So if you followed along, you already have the beginnings of your spaghetti wall, your system of tested truths. The idea started simply. When you're unsure if something's true, you test it, like tossing spaghetti at the wall to see if it sticks, to make sure it's done. But over time, that wall becomes sacred space, the structure that holds every truth you've confirmed through reason, experience, or faith. The spaghetti wall is your gatekeeper. Every thought, emotion, and influence must meet that wall before it's allowed to shape your reasoning. The next slide will show examples of mind truths, most of which we've already seeded together, and my own Christian truths, which the spiritualist voice will begin to build out later. You don't have to share my faith to build your wall, but you do need to know what you believe, what centers and steadies you. When everything else feels uncertain, what is your go-to? If any of these truths resonate, take them as a starting place, your first bricks from where you build your own. The spaghetti wall isn't about control, it's about clarity. It studies your reasoning before you begin asking, why for? So every question that follows starts with anchored truth. When you feel uncertain, anxious, or confused, start here. Does this hold up against what I know to be true? For example, when you find yourself thinking, why would they act like that? Or why can't they just, you go to the wall. You remember, their mind is theirs, just as yours is yours. You can influence others, but you can't control them. They can't control you. If a thought doesn't hold up, it doesn't get to stay. When used faithfully, the spaghetti wall becomes both a map and a mirror, showing where your truth holds firm and where your mind still needs alignment. So part of my spaghetti wall truths are shown here. And actually, I have 3 pages worth of Christian truths, but you get the idea. The therapist's role, helpful tools, clarity through communication structure. Why for? Identifying distortion. So why for teaches active diagnosis, a self-coaching process that turns reaction into reasoning. When distortion strikes, why for helps you trace it back to where it started. You begin with impact, like how or why is this affecting me? That question anchors you in the present, the surface response. From there, the next questions depend on the situation. Sometimes it's, why do I think this is true? Other times, why do I believe that? Or maybe it's, why do I keep returning to the same thought? Why does it matter to me? The questions shift, but the pattern stays the same. You keep looking until the answer feels stable, not emotional, until you can test it against your spaghetti wall. Often you'll discover the root isn't about now at all. It's an old belief, taught, modeled, or inherited. Something you've carried because it once made sense, but never got tested or retested when new information came through. Or maybe it's ready for retesting now in light of what you now know. For example, why is this affecting me? Because she keeps acting like she doesn't care. Well, why do I think that's true? Because she didn't respond the way I needed. Well, why do I believe that means she doesn't care? Because in the past, people who cared showed it differently. Well, why should that belief guide me now? Well, it shouldn't. I can't measure someone's care by my expectations. That conclusion becomes a truth, a spaghetti wall truth, that another person's response does not define your worth or intent. Each time you work through a why for loop, you aren't just solving one moment, you're clarifying a principle. If your conclusion holds steady under truth, it earns a place on your wall. That's how your reasoning system grows, one truth at a time, tested, confirmed, and anchored. Awareness isn't just recognition, it's remembrance. Remembering what's real and choosing to keep what's proven true. The therapist role, helpful tools, clarity through communication structure, using 7 facets to realign distortion. So when reasoning fractures under distortion, the 7 facets become your system of realignment. Together they form a sequence from naming what's real to releasing what's not yours to control. The Stoics called this the practice of virtue, with a whole lot of labels in Latin that I won't even pretend that I can pronounce. But the Prism reinterprets them as active mental corrections, facets that restore balance to your reasoning. And because it is a list, let me show you what those 7 facets look like. So, using the 7 facets to realign distortion, let's look at them. Awareness is orientation, the act of naming what's real. It calls your attention back to truth, cutting through illusion and reaction. Strength is empowerment, the courage to hold steady when emotion wants to take the lead. Knowledge becomes instruction. It filters the noise, clarifying what's actually known before belief can form. Understanding becomes integration, reconnecting fragmented insights into a coherent whole. Counsel is guidance, the refinement of delivery, how your internal truth should move into external communication, or internal communication for all of that. And wisdom becomes discernment, seeing beyond impulse and connecting the moment to what's eternal. And then there's deference. Deference as conformance, the humility to release what isn't yours to manage, grounding the cycle in peace. Each facet corrects a part of reasoning. Awareness reclaims perception. Strength stabilizes emotion. Knowledge clarifies the data. Understanding rebuilds the structure. Counsel refines the communication. Wisdom restores perspective. And deference resets control. That's integration in motion, the prism form of reasoned restoration. From awareness to humility, the mind realigns, balanced, coherent, and whole again. The therapist role, the application, clarity through communication structure, reasoning with clarity. So clarity isn't an endpoint. It's a way of thinking, a way of moving through the noise without losing your center. Every concept we've covered, the spaghetti wall, the Y4, the 7 facets, they work together for one purpose, to steady your reasoning. When you face confusion, frustration, or emotional weight, start with awareness. Remember what's true. What are you thinking? Ask why for to understand your reaction. Test it against your wall. Then use the facets to realign what drifted. That's reasoning with clarity. Not to prove you're right, but to stay right-minded. The therapist role isn't about fixing others. It's about becoming fluent in your own thought. When you can hear your reasoning clearly, you lead it, not the other way around. So as you move forward, anchor to truth, move with integrity, and aim for good. That's how clarity becomes character. Thanks for listening. Talk to you soon. No, Ezra, I am not doing the definitions list. That's your thing. Okay. Bye for now, folks. Be well.